The Clever Cat and the Marquis of Carabas, a tale of cunning and fortune once upon a time. In a small village, a miller's youngest son stood sadly by his father's grave. His two older brothers had inherited the mill and the donkey, leaving the youngest son with nothing but a cat. "What am I to do now?" the young man sighed. "With no money, no mill, and no way to earn a living, I'm left with nothing." But just as he was about to lose all hope, a voice startled him. "Do not worry, master," the cat at his feet said calmly. The miller's son was so shocked that he nearly fell backward. "Did you just speak?" he asked, his eyes wide. "I did indeed," the cat replied with a sly grin. "And if you trust me and follow my instructions, I promise to make you a wealthy man." The young man, though bewildered, figured he had nothing to lose. "I'm listening," he said. The cat, with a glint of mischief in his eye, asked for two things: a sturdy bag and a pair of boots. The young man found his father's old boots and gave the cat a bag, as requested. With a confident stride, the cat put on the boots, threw the bag over his shoulder, and set off toward the meadows, where rabbits hopped freely. The clever cat knew just what to do. He filled the bag with fresh vegetables and lay it open on the grass. Before long, a curious rabbit hopped inside, and in a flash, the cat had it trapped. He smiled, closed the bag, and headed straight to the grand castle where the king lived. Inside the castle, the king sat in his grand hall, surrounded by golden tapestries and guards dressed in fine silks. The cat strode confidently through the grand doors, bowing deeply. "Your Majesty," he said in a polite voice, "I present to you this fine rabbit, a gift from my master, the Marquis of Carabas." The king, intrigued by the mention of this mysterious marquis, was pleased with the gift. The cat left with a bow and returned again the next day, this time with a fat, plump turkey. "Another gift, sire, from the generous Marquis of Carabas," he said. For the next several weeks, the cat brought gifts: fish, chickens, and the finest game from the forest, all presented as offerings from the Marquis of Carabas. The king grew quite fond of this unseen marquis, thinking him a man of great wealth and generosity. Meanwhile, the cat's master had no idea what his clever feline companion was up to. One day, the king announced that he and his beautiful daughter would be taking a carriage ride through the countryside. This was exactly what the cat had been waiting for. Rushing home to his master, the cat exclaimed, "Master, today is the day. If you follow my instructions carefully, you will soon be a rich man and perhaps even marry the princess." The miller's son, though doubtful, agreed to follow the cat's plan. The cat told him to remove his clothes and jump into the river. Though hesitant, the young man obeyed, shivering as the cold water lapped around him. As the king's carriage approached the river, the cat leapt onto the road and waved his arms wildly. "Help! Help!" he cried. "The Marquis of Carabas is drowning." Recognizing the clever cat who had brought him so many gifts, the king immediately ordered his guards to rescue the marquis. The young man was pulled from the water, and the cat explained, "Sire, while my master was bathing, thieves came and stole his clothes." The king, feeling sorry for the marquis, ordered his servants to fetch the finest clothes from the royal wardrobe. Dressed in rich silks and velvet, the miller's son looked every bit the nobleman. The princess, watching from the carriage, blushed as she gazed at him. "He's so handsome," she whispered. As they rode through the countryside, the king admired the lush fields and beautiful meadows. At every stop, the farmers and villagers, just as the cat had instructed, bowed low and said, "This land belongs to the noble Marquis of Carabas." The king was greatly impressed, believing that the young man owned all the lands they passed. Soon they reached a grand castle, once owned by a powerful and wicked giant. The cat had arrived there ahead of the carriage and challenged the giant. "I've heard tales of your magical powers," the cat said, "but I wonder if you're as great as they say. Can you really transform into any animal?" The giant, not one to back down from a challenge, laughed. "Of course I can," he boomed, and in a flash, he turned into a fierce lion, roaring mightily. The cat pretended to be impressed but quickly added, "That's amazing. But surely, a giant like you could never turn into something as small as a mouse." The giant, prideful and boastful, scoffed. "Watch this," he declared, and in an instant, he shrank down into a tiny mouse. The clever cat wasted no time. He pounced on the mouse and, with a swift bite, ended the giant's reign forever. When the king's carriage arrived, the cat proudly welcomed them. "Welcome to the castle of the Marquis of Carabas," he announced. The king, already impressed by the Marquis's lands, was now in awe of his grand castle. A feast was laid out, and the king and his daughter dined with the young man. As the wine flowed and the evening grew late, the king turned to the miller's son and said, "Would you do me the honor of marrying my daughter?" The young man, who had fallen for the princess the moment he saw her, happily agreed. The very next day, the Marquis of Carabas married the princess in a grand ceremony, and they lived happily ever after in the magnificent castle. As for the cat, he lived the rest of his days in luxury, with his boots polished and his belly full, always by his master's side, grinning with satisfaction at the success of his clever plan.